Here's what I believe is true. Nothing that I'm going to say today will be a surprise to you, which may make you question, why am I watching this? Why am I here? Why am I participating in this? But the reality is, I think most everything that we talk about today will resonate deeply within you. For the most part, you get this. But hopefully, this framing, taking just 18, 19, 20 minutes to capture some best practices, will help all of us, I think, frame some things that we know, but help us better practice those things. Here's the bottom line. Customer service or guest service equals guest care. Guest care then communicates personal value. The reason any of us ever, in our own experiences, don't go back to a place, tell someone about a bad experience, or frequent a place, a product or a service, is because that place has probably provided great guest service, which is great guest care, which translates to us as personal value. Aside from the product, aside from the service, we've been valued. It's what anybody wants and what anyone deserves. The same is true in church world. So I'm going to talk to you for a few moments about 6 or 7 best practices that actually we should kick into place before the experience ever happens with our guests. So number one, I think it's helpful to learn from our own experiences. Learn from our own experiences. The reality is, every day of your life, you're a customer or consumer someplace. I think you can learn from those. Pay attention to where and how great guest care, personal value, is communicated. How'd that happen at a restaurant? How'd that happen online? How'd that happen at your bank? Take notes about how you receive great value from someone else providing guest care to you. It's really important for us to remember what life was like before we got here. And when I say here, I mean church. It's easy for us to forget pretty quickly what it's like to not be in church, especially if you've been around for several years. Studies have shown that it takes only 2 years or less. For those of us who are following Jesus, we belong to a local church, it's 2 years or less before most, if not all of our friends are also Christ followers. Now, what those stats aren't representing is that we've done a great job of winning our friends to Jesus. That's not the point of the study. Rather, what those studies have demonstrated is that we've dropped our friends who aren't here in church world. And we've made all of our friends people who are already here. 2 years or less. Which means it's pretty tough for most of us to remember our own experiences. To remember what it was like to be new in church. To remember what it was like to not have the values that have your feet pointed toward Jesus. To remember what it's like to be in a place that's unfamiliar. To be in a place where you have fears about what's supposed to happen and what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to behave in that place. So practice number one before the experience ever begins. Learn from your own experiences. Pay attention to where you've been and what you expect. Number two, it's important to prepare and pray before you ever show up to serve, to volunteer. Consider this. I've done this, you've done this, we've all done this. You're driving along, and you're headed to someplace pretty familiar, to work, to church, or maybe you're headed back home from someplace. And suddenly, you're aware that for some time, you have not been aware. Because suddenly you're at a stoplight, or you're at your destination, and it occurs to you, if I'm here, I have certainly already passed a bunch of stuff I never saw. I've made turns to get here. I have needed to stop. Did I stop? I have no idea if I stopped. Were there small children? Should I check the bumper of my car? This is not pretty. And not only is it funny, it's scary. Like, oh, I've checked out. And it's easy to fall into autopilot. We do it all the time. The same thing happens as we step into a familiar role where we serve. But week after week after week, you can show up and engage guests and provide great care, but you can also fall into autopilot and find yourself 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour into being where you're supposed to be, suddenly realizing, I don't know if I know the guy's name I just talked to, like 2 seconds ago. He told me his name twice. I have no idea what it was. It's easy to go into autopilot. So before we ever step out of our house to engage, we ought to stop and prepare, which is probably how preparing happens, is we just stop. Because there's no way to move into what we're doing without stopping what we've been doing. It gets no more profound than that all day long. Sorry. So stop and actually stop and pray. And just ask God to clear your mind, to help you leave what's done, what's unfinished. And then focus. Where am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to be doing? Pray and prepare. Number 3, just show up. Just show it. Here's the deal. I'll just be really candid and maybe a little brash. Everyone's serving. You're big men, big gals. I don't mean in size. You're adult people. So, pull up your big boy pants and your big girl pants and show up. You made a commitment. You said, I'll serve on this team. I'll do this deal. So just show up. Now, here's what's true about all of us. In our westernized, Americanized, it's all about me culture, it's tough for us, even as Christ followers, to break out of this pattern of individualism. And individualism is really, we push against anything that doesn't directly impact my desires and my preferences. Just kind of how we operate. It's our MO. And so when we're scheduled, and we know a schedule, right? You're big men and women. You keep a schedule and you know when to show up and you know when you're supposed to serve. But when that Saturday, that Sunday rolls around, what I desire, my preference right now, actually that schedule I committed to is impeding my own desire and preference to satisfy my individualism. Because I'd rather watch the game, I'd rather go to dinner, but you made a commitment. So, show up. Okay, enough of that. Number 4, it's important before we ever get here to expect new people. Have you ever attended someone else's, a friend of yours perhaps, someone else's family reunion? It's ridiculously tough to do. Because you walk in and everyone there except you knows everybody. They know everybody, they have inside stories and memories, and everyone's laughing about some old story and then you get in line for food and you're eating potato salad. It's incredible potato salad. And you say to your friend, this is amazing potato salad. And your friend says, well, it's Aunt Millie's recipe. And you say, well, I've got to meet Aunt Millie. And then your friend hangs his head and says, actually, Aunt Millie died 17 years ago. And you're just on the outside of everything. And it's embarrassing, it's uncomfortable, and really you wish you hadn't accepted the invitation because besides the food, nothing good's happening. So it's important to stop and consider whether or not we really expect new people. When I arrive where I'm going to serve, am I expecting new people? Or am I just going to have conversations with my friends and use all the insider language and all the insider history and leave people out because there's this pretty exclusive practice going on inside my conversations? It really is a wonderful thing to gather every week and experience biblical community, to catch up with friends who we haven't seen or talked to for a few days, maybe a week, maybe a couple of weeks. It's awesome. And it's a biblical value. But Paul also has much to say about how we treat, in fact, the NIV terms his language as, be careful how you treat outsiders, people who just aren't part of the family yet. In fact, it's interesting, I recently, in rereading 1 Corinthians, chapters 12, 13, 14 are all about spiritual gifts, except when I get to 14, and I know it's still about spiritual gifts. Paul's talking about kind of rank ordering 2 gifts. He spends a lot of time talking about the gift of prophecy and the gift of tongues. And even as I start this conversation, you're thinking, okay, off track, we're talking about guest services here. No, listen, I wonder if chapter 14 isn't as much about gifts as it is guest services. Because Paul's point is this. In rank ordering prophecy means that when an outsider comes into your gathering, they'll be able to understand everything that's going on. Not so much with your insider tongues language. I wonder if chapter 14 isn't as much about guest services as anything. That Paul has great concern for how the gathered believers behave with each other, because we should always expect that if actually we're building community and we're inviting friends to join us, that there'll be new people who don't know what we know. Expect new people. Number 5, it's just not about you. Now that may be news to you, so let me break this down. At one time it was about you. In fact, in the context where I live, Granger Community Church, there's a whole lot we do on the weekends that is about first-time guests. Guys and gals in the parking lot helping direct traffic and great parking spaces close to the building as possible. Members and regular attendees here, we would still show up without those guys in the parking lot. We might be a little irritated, but we would find a place, we'd park, and we'd get inside. Because there are other values that motivate us in being here than whether or not we get a close parking space. We'd probably be okay walking through a glass door at the entry of the building that had fingerprints and smudges, and we'd probably walk past it and be okay. And we use a full band every time we gather. Screaming guitars, drums, bass, and we pretty intentionally kick it up so you can feel it as well as hear it. And we use haze and lights, and there are very few believers who attend our church who have requested, would you please turn it up? We have this incredible children's space on both of our campuses that are engaging environments for kids to connect with each other and with the story of Jesus. And we've gone to great lengths to make sure that it's at their age level and it's appropriate and it's fun. And none of that is about you now. But it was at one time. At one time when you were new, all that was all about you. All about you. But there comes a point, and I'm guessing you've reached it. You're here, you're on a team, you're serving. You stepped up and said yes. My guess is that you're at a point where it's time to decide, is it about me or not? And if it's not about me, then I'll park further out intentionally so that new guests can have the main parking lot. If it's not about me, then I'll know that when I'm in the restroom and the 5 people who were there before me couldn't hit a trash can with a paper towel and left water and soap all over the counter, I'll go ahead and just take care of that. Because it's not about me. It's about the person coming in after me, who's new, who will be distracted by paper towels on the floor and a messy countertop and a splashed mirror. Some time ago, a young lady who had attended our church for several months was here every Sunday morning, here on time, got her kids checked in at the children's area, always sat center section, 5th or 6th row, always ready before the service started. Until that one Sunday, when whatever went wrong, and she didn't make it on time. In fact, she was running pretty late. Got her kids checked in, got back to the auditorium, and her seat at the 5th or 6th row center section was gone. So she stood at the back of the room, and she looked at this crowd of people. I mean, hundreds of people, 1,000 or so folks. And she leaned over to a staff person who was standing next to her, and she said, you know what? Months ago, after I first began attending here, I got it, that I matter to God. And it changed my life. But standing here looking at all these people, it occurs to me that it's not just about me, that everyone in this room matters to God. And she got it. She got it. I think it's time for you to get it. It's not about you. It's not about you. Number 6. Is that where we are, number 6? Number 6. It's important to understand base fears. Understand base fears. Early in our marriage, my wife Laura and I accepted one of those invitations to come sit for a 90-minute spiel for some free gifts. So we were young and stupid. We said, yeah, free stuff, we're in. So we went and sat through this. Oh my gosh. How many of you, have you done this deal ever? Timeshare experience? Here's the deal. Our first deal, it was not even a deal where they're like, we'll fly you, we'll put you up for 4 nights. No, this was like a little camping timeshare. It was ridiculous. We sat through this 90 minutes and thought we would never get our lives back. We went through, 27 people who said, really? The answer is no? Let me get somebody else. They'll come talk to you. I already said no. I'll say it again. We left with a vinyl luggage set. And I have not to this day, that was 25 years ago, I have not to this day taken anybody's invitation for a come sit through the spiel for anything free. Because I have certain fears now. I have great fears, in fact. That they want my money, that they're going to waste my time, that they don't know what's really valuable to me, that they won't hear my answer. You're connecting the dots, right? People who have been to church 15, 17 years ago, people who've never been to church because they somehow, in their minds, knew better, because they watched a TV show, they talked to some friends, they walk in with enormous fears that all he wants is their money, that we're going to brainwash their kids, that their answer no is not going to be sufficient, that you'll have to bend and move and cross things and stand and kneel and do stuff that you pay attention because it's going to go fast. People walk in with all kinds of fears. That we're going to demand that they change their lifestyle and not accept them. All kinds of fears. It's really important before we do anything else to acknowledge base fears, which will allow us, finally, number 7, to meet people right where they are. Right where they are. I don't travel a lot, but now and then I get out, and sometimes when I travel alone, I'll go to a shopping area, a mall. Not because I'm a shopaholic, I don't need to be at the mall, but I'll go to pick up a little something to take back to my wife and our daughter to say I thought of you. But when I walk into the mall, I may know the store I want to go to, but once I walk through the entry, I'm not sure how to get there. And so I have to find the directory, right? The directory will help me figure out where I'm going. But there's one more thing I have to find in the directory. Anybody know what it is? I got to find the red dot that says you are here, right? You are here. That's the X I have to find. Because when I find that X, I can judge based on where I am, my steps to get to where I need to go. Here's the reality. Everybody has an X that says you are here. And it doesn't matter how you or I or our guest arrived at that X that defines where they are, where you are. The bottom line today is, where you are is where you are, and you can't be anyplace else but where you are. The question is, will we meet people where they are? It's amazing all over the country. In church world, we expect people to just come through the door and just step into where we are. And it's on us to reconsider how we approach the experience on the weekend to meet people where they are. That has everything to do with the building, how we program services, how we communicate, how we receive guests, whether or not we apply a dress code, whether or not we correct their language. Do you know that months and months ago, a young man left our services and he said, "That was a great show." So I pulled him aside and I said, "Young man, listen, you need to understand something. If you're going to hang out here much, come back next week, You need to understand this is not a show. This was holy, sacred worship of an almighty God. No, I did not say that. The only thing I said to him was, did you have a great experience? Will you be back next week? I don't care what language he uses here. He could have said it was a blankety, blankety, blank show. Is that okay? Will we meet people where they are and accept them right where they are? Those are at least 7 things that if we'll practice before the experience ever begins, will allow us to communicate to people that we believe they really matter. That will communicate we believe they have intrinsic personal value. That I think will be incredibly disarming. And allow people to drop some walls, drop defenses, drop some base fears. And experience, not a show, not just worship, but Jesus. That's what this is about. 7 best practices. Lock them in. That's a wrap. You're going to stay tuned. We got a couple more sessions.